Beekeepers have to deal with ants everywhere around the world that honeybees are kept. Generally speaking, ants are opportunistic scavengers. They're really going to forage around the hive, capturing the dead bees that are on the ground, or maybe any bees that are dying on the ground. Maybe if there's debris that comes out of the hive, old bits of pollen or things like that, or brood that the bees are aborting for hygienic reasons. All of those things are things that attract ants to hives. But there are times where ants will physically go into hives to collect one of three different things. First, there are sugar-loving ants, and those ants, of course, would go into a honeybee hive for the purpose of collecting nectar or honey. There are also fat and oil-loving ants, and I'm going to say there are also protein-loving ants, and the ants that like the fats and oils tend to be the ants that like the proteins, so the ants that would invade hives for those purposes are usually going after brood, right? Brood is protein, brood are fats and oils all mixed into one nice little packet. There is another reason that you might find ants in hives, and that's strictly for habitation. Hives make really convenient places for ants to nest. For example, there's a large category of ants that will actually nest in the wood of hives. Those go by the general name carpenter ants. So I am not going to go specific ant species by specific ant species. The ants that we have here in Florida that are problems for honeybee hives are different from the ants that you might have wherever you are watching this video. So that's why I really wanted to start with this general premise that ants are coming here in the first place, usually to collect what's on the ground. But if they're really good at their task and the colony is weak, they can move into that hive to go either after the sugar or the proteins and fats and lipids, or use the hive as a place to live themselves. So first things first, if you're going to stop ant problems at your hives, you really need to know what type of ant you have. For example, here in Florida, fire ants can be a significant problem. We have this ant, it's called a fire ant, it's red, it's very painful. People know this thing because they've stepped in the nest. You will often see fire ants build nests at the base of honeybee hives because honeybees are constantly taking out their dead. They're constantly aborting brood. Bees that miss the entrance when they're coming in from foraging might land on the ground. All of these provide very opportunistic things that fire ants can eat. So we have fire ants here as a problem, but what you struggle with may be very different. So the first thing you need to do when combating the ants that are at your nest is to know your enemy. Here in the United States, we have county extension offices all over the country where you can take pictures or send samples of the ants and have someone identify them for you. If you're outside the U.S., you almost certainly have beekeepers in your local beekeeping club or your national beekeeping club or other specialists in your area who can identify the ants for you. Why do you want to identify the ants? Because it's important to know who it is so that you can know why they're there. If you know why they're there, then you can control them appropriately. Let me give you an example. If your ant is identified as an ant that goes after sugar, then you might try to attract it and capture it with sugar-related baits. If your ant is coming after your hive for proteins or lipids or fats, then you would want a completely different bait that would target those kinds of ants. So knowing the enemy is the important first step in control. The second step, once you know the species or the general type of ant that you have, is you can control it one of two major ways. The first of those is a chemical way, and the best way to do this with chemicals is by using baits. Baits are very tailored to the group of ants that you are trying to target. Sugar-loving ants, fat-loving ants, protein-loving ants. That's why you need to know what ant you have. Now, it's important to know that adult ants generally don't eat solid foods. They eat liquids best. So if you're going from a liquid to a solid bait scale, liquids tend to be better. They're easily accessible to adult ants. Then you move into gels. Then you move into the solid or the granular baits. It's not that solid or granular baits don't work. They do work. It's just the ants have to do something to extract out of that the toxin that you're trying to deliver to them. So when you have a bait identified based on the ant that's going into your hive, then you have to follow the label of the product to administer that bait around the honeybee nest. Think about it. If something is toxic to an ant, it is likely toxic to the bee that you are trying to protect. So anytime you are applying a bait, you really want to put it inside of something. That something is usually called a bait station. So you can find lots of different models of bait stations that you can open, administer the bait, and then you can put the station safely around the hive. The bees can't access the bait, the ants can, and assuming you chose the right bait for the right ant, then you'll get very reasonable control. There are some baits that are granular, for example, that you might have to sprinkle around the hive. If you were going to do that, you could cover the bait with a type of cover that allows the ants to go up under it, but not the bees. I've seen this a lot personally where we've had to control fire ants. A lot of the fire ant baits are granular. So we find a product label for fire ant use, we put it around hives, and then you can cover that bait so it's inaccessible to the bees, but that the ants can go up under that cover and gain access to it. So ideal baits target the ants that you're trying to control. Ideal baits don't kill instantly. You want those ants to take that bait with them back to their nest, and once at the nest, they can distribute it amongst the other workers, so it will have a nice slow kill and ultimately take out the hive. You want that bait not to be repellent, and assuming you've done all of that and administered it according to label in bait stations around hives, you can get effective control of the ants that are plaguing your bees. The second broad category of control from an ant perspective is exclusion. So if baits are more the chemical or the toxin or the kill the ant route, exclusion is more the keep the ants out of your hive route. And there's really two broad ways to do that as well. The first of those ways is having your hive's own stands where the legs of those stands sit in moats. Think about the old castle system where they would dig a moat around the castle. People couldn't get to the castle. The idea is the same with ants. If this hive is on a stand and the stand has legs and those legs sit in containers of maybe soap water, then the ants can't cross that soap water moat and get onto the legs of the hive and then up into the nest. Keep in mind, anything that you put around the hive that can kill ants can also kill bees. So if you go the moat route where the legs of the stands are sitting in containers of soap water or things like that, you want to protect those cans so that bees can't accidentally end up in those as well. You can use moats, but you can also use sticky deterrents to keep ants from coming up in the hive. So rather than have something that the ants can't swim across, there are a lot of different things that are sticky in nature that are designed to keep ants from crawling across them. So again, if this hive is sitting on a stand and the stand has legs, rather than putting those legs in a container of soap water, you could take that leg and wrap it in something that's designed to keep ants from crossing it. It can be sticky, as I've discussed. It can simply be a repellent that keeps ants from wanting to go across it. But the best exclusion devices only work as good as the weed control around your hive. Think about this. If your hive is on a stand that's got legs and you've got sticky substance around those legs that ants can't crawl across, but there are weeds that are growing above that sticky substance and touching the hive at other points, the ants can crawl those weeds to get into your hives. If you put your hives under a tree and a branch touches the top of the hive, the ants can crawl down that branch and get into your hive. So, to summarize everything that I've talked about, know your ant. What ant is attacking your hive? Once you know that, you can choose an appropriate bait to put around the hive. Put those baits in something that keeps bees and other things from getting into it. Or you can keep your hives on different stands that exclude entry of ants into the nest. If it's really, really bad, if everything you've tried, ants still can overcome that, you might consider moving your hives away from the pressure until the ants can get under control. The best defense against ants is always the strong hive, but go from there to exclusion devices, and then if you have to control them chemically, you can. And if you follow these simple steps, your bees will be ant-free and ants won't be a worry for you in your beekeeping operation.